after our first episode with Alana Trevino on EMDR, I received so many messages and conversations from spouses and even some first responders themselves asking the same questions. What does this really look like? Because I think sometimes the fear of therapy comes from simply just not knowing what to expect when you go in there. So I'm so incredibly grateful to welcome back Alana Trevino to Code 44 podcast. Today, we can go just a little bit deeper into what EMDR actually is, what potentially happens during that first session, and why so many first responders are finding hope and healing through the whole process. So welcome, Alana, back to Code 44.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited for the conversation. I mean, I've said to you before, I could geek out about EMDR for hours all of the time. So I'm into it.
Me too. Let's geek out. So for some of those maybe that have not heard the first episode, let's just do a really quick introduction to what is EMDR for those first-time listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. EMDR is a trauma therapy that helps the brain and the nervous system really get unstuck is the easy way to put it. We have difficult experiences that get stuck in our brains that lead us to believe unhelpful things about ourselves. The therapy is structured. It is intentional. It is the proper filing away of what we've experienced so that it's not a mess anymore. It's an 8-phase process, as we've talked about. And I can give you the details about those phases if you want to later on. But we take you through those phases and find some resilience and recovery from what you've experienced.
Great. Yeah. And I think on our first episode, you explained it as it's like a filing cabinet full of a bunch of papers and you're putting it in the appropriate folder. And I think that made the best correlation for me. Like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So maybe that'll help someone understand a little bit about what we're doing. Everyone's brain's kind of made up the same way, but we're trying to compartmentalize and put things in the right spot. So why do you feel EMDR has become so effective specifically for those that face trauma?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a therapy that has been growing in popularity. And some of that, I think, is just due to the growing body of research that's coming out about it. It's always been effective. And I think clinicians are becoming trained and certified in it and talking about it more. And we're also maybe finding new and more creative ways to talk about it and to share it with folks. The reason it works so well, though, is because it is working with the natural capacities of the brain. Your brain wants to heal. Your brain has adaptive processes already built into it. So EMDR is just us creating the environment for that to happen.
Right. I know I had someone come up to me after they had seen the first episode and said, does EMDR actually erase memories that you have? So I'm going to let you answer that.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. The answer very quickly is no, 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 no. It is storing them better. It is reducing the emotional vividness of it. It kind of makes it so, and folks will describe the results differently. For me personally, after I did my own bout of EMDR therapy, it's like you can look back on the memory. I know that happened, but it's just a bad thing that happened. It was just an unpleasant experience. It is not as gripping. It certainly doesn't bring me to my knees. And a lot of folks who go through the therapy would say the same thing. I certainly remember it. Maybe it's in black and white as opposed to vivid, horrifying detail now.
I like that explanation because the memory is still there, but because it's processed, now it becomes not so emotionally devastating to you.
Right.
Is that a good way to explain it?
I would say so. Yeah, that's one
Yeah.
part of it is it's
Mhm.
not as vivid, horrific, all of the things. We're not as sensitive to it. The other piece is we have new adaptive conclusions to it. In other words, maybe this memory made me think I can't handle anything, or I'm a bad person, or this or that negative belief about myself. We see a switch in that. We see a transformational change in those beliefs to now I believe that I'm just a person doing my best, or now I have the awareness that I can choose who to trust, dependent on the memory. So we see a reduction in the distress, and then we see a switch in the adaptive beliefs. And we even see a change from the body level. That, man, when I think about that, maybe it used to make my chest really heavy and my hands and palms would sweat. Now it's quiet in the body. We often say that. That's a big cue of how we know something has been processed, digested, metabolized properly is when you bring it up, it's quiet in the body.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So now that we know a little bit about it again, and I would encourage anyone who's listening that has not listened to our first episode, we go into a lot of detail there. So please go and watch that episode to learn a little bit more. But let's kind of talk about what everyone's been asking, which is walk us through what happens during a typical first EMDR appointment.
Okay. Yeah. Every clinician's going to work a bit differently, of course. When I think about a first session, after we've met and done the initial forms and all the things, a first EMDR session with a client kind of starts with phases 1 and/or 2. Believe it or not, some clinicians, and depending on the client, will switch up phase 2 and phase 1, the order, simply because phase 1 is history taking. That's where I'm kind of asking you, hey, what's the thing you want to work on? And you can answer that question very broadly. You can answer that question with these symptoms. You can answer that question with this thing happened. The phase 2, though, is resourcing and stabilization. So it's, hey, when we open up that box that has that experience and those memories inside, it could be a bit destabilizing. We want to make sure that you're ready for that and prepared for that. So we might do some assessments about dissociation. We might do some assessments about, do you have complex trauma, or is this just one incident? We just kind of want to know what's there. We might do some grounding skills. We might walk through some deep breathing skills. Um, but some form, typically the first session is some form of what's going on, and here's
Mm.
some skills and assessments.
Great. Kind of preparing that individual then for future
Mhm.
sessions, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Preparation and taking those assessments are really, really important steps.
Yeah. So I know a lot of times, and this question came mostly from first responders themselves, which said, do I have to relive that traumatic thing, whether it was a call, whether it was an event? Do I have to go and re experience that again if I'm going to go through EMDR?
Right, right. That would be really scary. And the simple answer is no, not really.
Yeah.
Do you have to share every detail? Absolutely not. Do you have to say all of the things to me, your clinician, out loud? Absolutely not. There is a level of activating the memory. And we can do that in different ways based on someone's preference, their capacity, based on a lot of different factors. We're able to take bite sized pieces, if you will, of the trauma. And we go at someone's pace, pacing and safety, and really knowing the client is a really important part of the clinician's job. So, no, you do not have to relive it. No, you do not have to give every detail. Know that there is, of course, some level of activating the thing, but that's not always in direct storytelling. In fact,
Yeah.
typically it's not.
Yeah. I know one of the things that you just said a few seconds ago is if you come in and share the things that you are feeling, maybe some of the symptoms, whether that is retreating from situations or depression, or, there's a whole series of effects that trauma can have on our body. I have heard some people say there wasn't just one event that happened to me. So I don't think EMDR is going to work for me. Is that the case? Does one single thing have to happen, or can it be a magnitude of stuff that you don't even really know?
100% the second one. Yeah, sometimes it's real. We call it maybe a single incident trauma. Most EMDR trainers tell clinicians that's not typical or frequent, and most of your clients do not have one single incident. Right? We are complex human beings with histories and complex emotions, so we have a lot of things that go on in our lives. And you also don't really need to know, hey, I'm struggling with lack of sleep, and I know it comes from this experience. Most of the time, we don't know that, and that's fine. So you work collaboratively with your clinician to find where the work needs to be done. You certainly don't have to have it all figured out.
Right. And I really want people to hear that spouses, family, if you are a first responder yourself, I think that's really important because it doesn't have to be a single thing. And I have shared in my podcast Mike experience. He went through EMDR. There wasn't one specific thing that was triggering him. And why he went through it was because the sirens were triggering him when he was off duty. So it was more of the effect it was having, but not really knowing all of the compounding issues specifically or by name. It was just the magnitude of all of them being pushed down over those years. And so I think that's been a misconception of some of the individuals who have watched our first episode is, well, I didn't have that one thing. Well, it's not just about the one thing. So I hope everyone hears that for sure.
It's really about what is happening inside your nervous system, what has compounded over days, weeks, months, years. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So what if they don't want to talk about anything? None of the details, they don't want to relive any of the things that they have seen. Can you go with no details at all?
You can. You can. There are protocols that allow us to maybe assign a name or a word to the thing you want to work on. If your secret covert mission was distressing to you, we can still find a way to work on it. Sometimes it takes creativity. Sometimes it takes some discussion with your clinician beforehand, but it's definitely possible.
It's
Yes.
possible. Great. Great. So that leaves this available for everybody. So hopefully there's
Uh-huh.
no more questions about, will this be applicable for me? The answer is yes, it's for you.
Yeah, there's not many scenarios where I would say, no, EMDR can't at least help you with that thing. Now, sometimes there are other steps that we need to do before we get to. Everybody thinks of EMDR as just the eye movements. I'll tell you that is actually phase 4 of 8. And so sometimes we're going to hang out in phases 1 or 2 and do some different types of work first depending how your nervous system has protected and defended you, if you will, from the trauma. For instance, some people survive by shoving things really, really deep down into their brain. And so, that might be the situation you said where, hey, I'm coming in and I don't know where this started or what's going on with it. So we might need to work with the parts of you that have hidden, if you will, some of that information and gain some trust first. But absolutely anything's possible and we're able to be creative.
Let's talk a little bit about what this actually looks like through a therapy. You talked about phases 1 and 2. What's the rest of it? What would they experience when they come in? You said eye movement sometimes might be 4. What happens in 3 and what happens in 4? So let's talk about each one of those steps.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, to take you through it, phase 1 is your history taking. That is, what are you coming in for? That's what do we want to work on? What's the goal? Phase 2 is preparation. I tend to call it resourcing. It's what are the skills that we're going to use in order to come up for air or change the channel, if you will, when things get a little bit tough. Phase 3, you'll see some people call it assessment or activation. What's interesting is phase 3 and 4 are pretty well attached, whereas we do phase 3 relatively quickly and we lead you straight into phase 4, which is the actual desensitization part. So the activation and assessment is when I'm saying to you, hey, let's bring up that memory gently, carefully, with good pacing and relationship. But I might be asking you, what is the image that you see there? What's the belief about yourself? What are the emotions? What are the body sensations? I might ask you to rate a couple of things. What's the distress level score? Different things like that. And then we go straight into desensitization. I say basically take everything we've just brought up, and I want you to notice whatever you're noticing as we start this, hear this being the perhaps eye movements or a lot of folks these days like to use the buzzies, I call them, which are vibrating kind of hand things that just buzz back and forth. Some form of bilateral stimulation, some form of activating left and right brain. So you see how in phase 3, we activated everything. And in phase 4, we're doing the back and forth buzzies or eye movements, perhaps. Phase 5 is installation. So once we've desensitized how painful that memory is, installation is starting to change the beliefs around the thing to no longer believe some form of I failed, but instead believe something more helpful and true. Phase 6 is body scan. And that's where we're looking at the very somatic body level to say what parts of you are still holding on to this. Maybe when you bring it up, there's a heaviness or a tingling or a tightness or a heat. We're working with that level. The next phase is closure, which is basically when we get to the end of our session, if we haven't fully processed this target, we want to put it away really, really well. I always guarantee people I'm not going to send you out of session to your car to drive on the highway raw and open. I promise
Mhm.
you that if you allow yourself to go to the places you need to do to find healing, that I'll be with you in order to help you put it in the places it needs to go, to find proper closure, to contain it and set it here. And you can leave it here until you come to your next session. So that's some form of containment and closure. And then the last step, phase 8, is reevaluation. That's kind of saying, have we fully completed this target, or are we moving on to the next target? It's checking in on where things are now.
As you were describing that, I was getting goosebumps. As you said, I'm not going to send you on the highway, right? You're going to close that box back up and make sure that they're in a safe place. Um, I think that's powerful, and I think
Mm.
that's important for people to know that they're not going to be exposed and then sent on their way because that's scary.
Absolutely. And that fear can keep people from fully accessing what they need to in session in order to get the healing. They'll hold back, right? Because they'll say, well, I've only got 40 minutes left. And after this, I got to pick my kid up from school. So I'll guarantee you I will leave us enough time. I will be here with you. And we've already practiced some things in phase 2, our resourcing phase. We already know exactly how we're going to close it up. And we've probably practiced some micro activating and closure. So we're good. By this time, we are more than a well oiled team. We know what we're doing.
I'm going to take us back to step 4, just because I know that there's been a lot of questions around this. You talk about eye movement, which I think is the one that most people are familiar with. I think it's probably been around the longest. There's buzzies, I think that you said. When you're going through step 4, are they reliving things at that moment, or is it just simply the eyes being moved back and forth, or that desensitization happening as you're moving things back and forth?
Yeah. Are you reliving things in that moment? No, not directly. What's happening in that moment is I'm asking you to be with what's happening. Um, what EMDR really requires is for us to slow down, be present, and notice. That's a phrase or a couple of terms that I took from a trainer, Tom Zimmerman, who's in this area, and it really resonates maybe with me because that's exactly what we need to do. So you're slowing down and you're really just telling me what's coming up in your mind. You might notice images, you might notice a thought, you might notice an emotion, you might notice a body sensation, you might notice, hey, we're here, and then my brain just brought up this random thing. You are truly just the observer of your own mind. And have no fear. In session, we teach you how to do this. Um, it's not as abstract as perhaps I'm describing it. You're really just paying attention. You're the only one who can say what's happening inside right now. And so when we pause, I'll say, "Hey, what are you noticing?" And
Hmm.
your job in that moment is truly just to report back what's coming up for you. Is it
Right.
a thought, a feeling, an emotion? And my job in that moment, and the only reason I ask, is to make sure we are still moving. I want to make sure you're not some form of drowning or spinning. I want to make sure we're still going forward. It's okay if you are drowning or spinning. I just want
Hmm.
to know so I can help you out. And if
Right.
that's not happening and you're still moving, I'm going to stay out of the way and I'm
Hmm.
going to let your mind process what it needs to until that distress level comes to zero.
Wow. So during that time then, let's talk about what does someone physically experience during the session? I mean, I can make some assumptions of what that is, but I'm going to let you describe what are some of the things that they might be physically feeling in their actual body, maybe not necessarily their mind, but everywhere else.
Yeah, it's completely individual and subjective and also dependent on, of course, what we're working on. It makes me think of a somewhat recent session with a client who was describing a fire that they were in where they were rescuing a victim. And this fire in particular, this feels silly to say, but was really, really hot. It was
Yeah, yeah.
one of those where they reached the point where they were going to have to leave without finding the victim. And of course, that's a really intense, terrifying moment. And during the time of reprocessing, he did describe feeling on the side of his face, exactly where he had felt the heat at that time, a strong heat sensation. Now, don't worry, there was no marking. He was totally fine. He wasn't injured in any way, but there was an awareness of that's where that was.
Yeah.
There was also within that same session, I'll tell you, everybody's brains are so unique. This person in particular processes very somatically, very body based. I have some people who process differently than that, but this person is very body based. There was a time when during the processing, they said they noticed their eyes were just naturally, we were using the buzzies at the time, not the eye movements, but their eyes were scanning, kind of like scanning the perimeter as they were in this particular call. So this isn't all the time. The body doesn't always reenact what was happening. But I say that to tell you it is powerful at times what the body needs to complete in the stress cycle. The cliche example that we hear about in our EMDR training is when stress cycles are cut off or interrupted. If you're hiding from kidnappers, you can't scream. But guess what? Your body needs to scream. Your body
Yeah.
has a shout that it needs to release. The more relevant example, perhaps, would be as first responders. You're going out and you're saving everybody else, but the human part of you is experiencing that frightening thing too. And perhaps there is a yell. Perhaps there is a deep breath. Perhaps something needs to be completed at the somatic body level that didn't get to happen then. So oftentimes within the
Interesting.
EMDR process, the body gets the opportunity to complete that stress cycle. And don't worry, you're completely in control of it. It's not scary or anything like
Right.
that. In fact,
Right.
it's rather powerful and relieving.
Yeah. It's like you get to process what you had to shove down in the moment. It almost sounds like.
100%. Yep, it's
Mhm.
kind of shaking off all of the stuff that got stuck inside of you.
Wow. And for our first responders, I would think that would be a common thing to get that to process through.
And on and push down a lot of the stuff that they're
Yeah.
experiencing, right? In order to be the one who is in charge, they have to shut down the part of
Yeah.
them that's experiencing the human emotion. So we
Yeah.
reprocess a lot of, as a dad at that
Yeah.
scene, you
Yeah.
suppressed the dad feelings, as a
Mm.
friend at that scene,
Yeah.
you suppressed what friend you would have thought.
Their bodies have to normalize situations that are not normal. And so this allows them to reprocess that to make it normal.
To release it, absolutely.
Yeah. This is going to sound like a crazy one, but this was an actual question. Actually, I've heard it a couple of times. Am I going to get emotional during these? And I know, typically men
Sure.
don't like to get emotional. Us females, we don't mind showing emotion all day long, or at least most
Yeah.
of us don't. But, I think that's a real fear. Like, am I going to come in? Am I going to completely be emotional and lose my
Mhm.
ability to keep it all together? I think is more of their concern.
Okay. Am I gonna like drown in a river of my own tears
Yeah.
at your office and then never be able to stop? Somehow I've heard that fear, right?
Yeah.
If I feel like if I let myself cry, I'll just never stop. Um,
Right.
I think it was Tom Zimmerman's work as well, who he said, maybe it was one of his books, that he's traveled to lots of different, even psychiatric hospitals. And he says, I promise you, they're not filled with pools of people's tears. Eventually, we stop.
Yeah. 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 We only
But
have so much.
right, right. The other thing is, I reassure folks, tears, it is just cortisol leaving your body. You're either going to cry it out, sweat it out, pee it out. It's got to come
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But the truth is, will you get emotional? I don't know, maybe. If so, it's part of the necessary process. I've certainly processed targets with people where they didn't shed a single tear, and that's not bad or unique. It's just very regular. Emotion comes out in different ways. Sometimes sadness does need to come out, or grief needs to come out in the form of tears. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it comes out like we just talked about at the body level, or in different ways, kind of cognitively. But again, pacing, safety, and a proper relationship with your clinician is important so that you feel capable and 0% judged, and able to do what your brain and body and nervous system needs to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would guess any type of emotion could come out. It might not be tears. It might be anger. It might be frustration. It could be any sorts of emotion coming out.
It's just a matter of being open to what is. Your brain will take us exactly to where it needs to go, and your job as the client is just to be open to that.
Next question I'm going to ask you. I might be giving some bad advice to people here because my answer has been when people have asked me about EMDR, my response has been try it. If you don't like it, just stop, right? I don't know that that's necessarily the right advice. Can someone stop during this process?
I mean, the simple answer is yes. Like you're not restricted or tied down or assigning
Sure.
your life away. Certainly, you can stop. Um, if you mean stop within the session, it is even encouraged, I'll tell you, like I tell folks as we get going, if at any point during this it feels like too much, too fast, too soon, wave your hand up in the air or say stop, or just set the buzzies on the cat. You can do whatever you want. Empowerment, choice, control, are some of the main important principles, I'll say, of EMDR therapy, because so often the trauma was anything but in your control, or of your choice. So we want to give you as much choice and control in the process as possible. So you can certainly stop mid-session, and your clinician should say, "That's so fine. Let's talk about what happened and what we want to do next and how we can mend what went on." You can even stop. Sure, you can even stop going to therapy. I don't recommend ghosting your
Yeah.
therapist. Let them know what's going on, right? If you
Yeah.
start therapy and you're saying, this is too much for me, this is too fast for me, this is too soon, that simply means that we haven't done pacing correctly. Your nervous system is not loving how fast we're going. That can be mended, that can be worked on, that can be fixed. So I don't think you're giving bad advice there, Amy. I think you can stop at any time. Certainly for best progress, we do push through the things that are difficult and hard, but there's a limit. Sometimes what I'll tell people is this: my job and even my goal is to push you towards the edges of your window of tolerance, but don't let me shove you out of it. If you notice you're out of that window of tolerance, we're not getting much done anyway. I'm going to push you. But if
Yeah.
you feel shoved, speak up.
Yeah. I love that the way that you answer that, which is, they are in control at all times. And I think for a first responder, that's important to understand that your body heals at a certain pace, and that pace is really determined on you. You're there as a clinician to push them, but they still are in control of the whole situation. So I think that's when I get the question, I think that's what the fear is really behind that question.
Do you mean first responders like control? What are you talking about?
I know, gosh, I don't
Our
crazy.
husbands, control freaks? What? Never.
Never.
No, we
No,
allow
no.
for it.
Yeah. So, I would imagine EMDR can be emotionally exhausting afterwards. Now, I will say in the example of Mike going through it afterwards, he was, full of energy
Hmm.
because he felt the release, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not going to be the same for everyone, I'm sure.
Mhm.
I would imagine a lot of people walk out exhausted and probably some walk out feeling like a weight has been lifted off their shoulders. So let's hear the clinician response here is how do people feel afterwards?
Yeah, it's all of that at different times, and if you feel neither of those, that's okay too. Um, It depends kinda where you're at in the process. Certainly, if today's session was us really getting into the nitty-gritty, then when you leave, you've done a lot of emotional heavy lifting. It's like the emotional version of a really good workout, and you're like, "That workout was beneficial, that workout was great, and I'm pooped," and that's okay. That means you're gonna need some hydration and some rest, and some understanding perhaps from the people around you. Um yeah, certainly sometimes you'll leave feeling so relieved. Sometimes you'll leave feeling so, ugh, that was heavy. And sometimes you'll leave feeling like, ho hum. And that's fine. I don't want anyone to compare how they might feel after, because again, we all have different nervous systems and experiences and protective mechanisms, and it's very individual.
So, what should a spouse expect then after a session? And really, what I'm
Yeah.
asking is do we push for information? Do we ask them to talk about it? Or do we just let them do their thing and communicate with us when it feels comfortable?
Yeah, I think the latter. We let them do their thing. I think letting your spouse know, hey, I'm here for you. Hey, if you want to talk about that, we can. Don't push for details about, what the target was or what the memory was. In fact, if you do that and they do tell you all of the things, what you might be doing unintentionally, remember the phase 7 was closure.
Yeah.
Your spouse perhaps just put the thing in the container and you might be accidentally asking them to take it out. And maybe they will. And then they'll be like, oh no, now I got to put it back, which it's not the end of the
Yeah.
world. By that
Yeah.
time, they should have the skills to do so. But
Yeah.
um, it's certainly okay to say, hey, I'm here if you want to talk about this. You totally don't have to. What do you need from me? Everybody's different. I'll tell you, my husband, when he finishes an EMDR session, he usually comes home pretty reflective, I would say.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Not necessarily happy or sad, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of reflective. Maybe wants to just chill for a little bit, and then he kind of comes out of it, and
Yeah.
and that's great. I often tell clients, today's not the day perhaps to have a big discussion or make big choices. You're probably not going to do EMDR therapy and then deep couples therapy the
Mm.
next day. Um, but yeah, so just be supportive, be kind, be there, and let them do their thing.
Yeah.
Let them know
That
you're proud of them, right? Like, this is a
yeah.
big step, and I'm not
Right.
gonna nag you. I don't need the information. Good job, honey.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, you gave a ton of really good advice there. And I liked when you said we might be unintentionally asking them to open that box back up by
Mhm,
asking for
mhm.
details. And I know I have certainly probably done that on occasion of just wanting to know the details and ask those questions. So I really appreciate that advice. I thought that was really powerful for us as spouses because sometimes we just want to know so we can understand ourselves. But especially with EMDR, maybe that's not the
Yeah.
right thing.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing. It does make me kind of reflect on the feeling from a spouse's side.
Yeah.
Maybe you just spent a lot of time and effort uh, getting your husband to agree that something is going on, and now they're in therapy. And man, it seems like they're opening up, but we wanted them to open up to us. And that might be a really kind of confusing, difficult thing to accept.
Yes.
The hope is eventually, they will open up to you and that
Yeah.
connection will happen between the two of you. Um, Me being a person who does like to fix and solve things, I have had to fight that urge with my own husband and his treatment. Um, part of my EMDR clinician brain has one to say, "What'd you work on? Where are you at? How's it going?"
Yeah.
But I fight that because I
Yeah.
know that that's not helpful. He's just got done with session. He's not trying to come home for more of it, and I am
Right.
also not trying to be the wife that needs the information. That's about me. That
Yeah.
wouldn't be helping him. That's a me thing that I need to work through, perhaps.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you know what I have found is eventually over, weeks of conversation later, small bits and pieces will start to come out. And, he'll say, "Oh, I talked about this with my clinician," or "This happened,
Yes.
during EMDR." It's just out of left field. It's like, "Oh, okay." And that's the time that, they can
Yeah.
share it. But allowing
Yeah.
them to do it at their own free will when it's right for them, I think is really key.
I think that goes for before, during, or after treatment. The general concept that pushing tends to create resistance.
Yeah.
Just like they like control, our husbands don't like to be told what to do. It has to
Yep.
be their decision. And clinically, I'll say it does have to be their decision. They have to be on board. We have to make the transition from my wife made me do this to, yeah, I actually do want to participate in this. At home, yeah, what that looks like is, bringing up concerns and sharing support and being present and curious
Yeah.
without being pushy. I hate to say it, but naggy, and all of those things. Sometimes spouses are trying to quell their own anxieties by pushing on other spouse and saying, "Hey, what's going on with this? Fix this, tell me this." But maybe you just need to work through and process and get support for your own anxiety there, which is
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's move into how long does this all take? And this has been a common question that I've received, which is, do I just go one time and that's it? It's over with.
Huh?
So I'm going to let you kind of talk through that. How many sessions does it usually take? And can someone get relief after one session? So let's talk about that whole process.
Yeah. So this is a really kind of nuanced area. There is no exact answer. The idea of one session, you say, can people get relief after one session? The answer is kind of yes. Or a key word being relief. I don't really believe you can get true healing or integration or resolution, or true reprocessing after one session. But we do see relief at times. There are different EMDR informed interventions that are um, almost like the quick and dirty version, if you will, of the 8 phases that folks will use after. They'll take these things to natural disaster sites, or even there's some models now where officers are being taught how to do just the desensitization piece on each other, which is such a beautiful adaption and addition to the field. Now, they are not therapists to each other by any means, but they're learning how to do the eye movements. They're learning how to bring distress down. And boy, that relief is amazing and so necessary. Now, when you're in a clinical standpoint, the 8 phase protocol is so important. We have to be careful about pacing and timing and assessing the important things, and that does take time. So there's no gold standard on the number of sessions. The goal overall with the full treatment is sustainable integration without overwhelm. So that's going to take some time depending on how your nervous system has adapted, depending on what the thing is that happened, how long ago it happened, um, again, how you've protected yourself from it, what your current support systems are. There's a whole lot that goes into, if two people experience the exact same thing and they both go to EMDR therapy for it, they're not going to go to the finish line at the same time. Different people, different nervous systems, all
Mm.
of that. I can tell you, um, there have been a couple of times that I have used the, if you will, one session relief kind of adaptations of EMDR therapy. That's for folks who may come in with this really specific, hey, I was on a call and I can't get that image of the blood and guts right here all out of my head, or I can't get, one was very specific, her face out of
Mhm.
my head of the victim.
Mhm.
And we did some kind of quickened phase 1 and 2 skills, because we don't
Mhm.
walk into phases 3 and 4 without having resources, but there's ways to expedite that. And we did some reprocessing, reduced the vividness of that visual. Client was able to sleep that night for the first
Mhm.
time in weeks. Client was not triggered every time they went to work and that similar call came in. And then they come back. And then we say, okay, let's kind of fill in the blanks. Let's get you some quick relief.
Yeah.
And then we will go through the full 8 phase protocol. Now that you're sleeping and you're able to like come up for air for a minute.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. So you can get quick relief potentially in one session, especially if there's a specific thing that is really driving your anxiety or your stress. But
Yeah.
typically, if it's, first responders that have years and years and years of built up and there's not necessarily a specific thing, that probably from what you described is going to take a little bit longer in the process just because you're going to have to go through everything. Is that correct?
Yeah, go through everything maybe makes it sound more laborious than it really
Okay.
is, but we ought to go through all 8 phases, in some sort of a sequence and assess the appropriate things,
Yeah.
so that the healing that happens is not just desensitization. It's not just making it feel so much better, but we
Yeah.
also have reprocessing. We're also able to find new beliefs and things like that. Now, I will say different clinicians are trained in different specialty protocols. This kind of, I maybe shouldn't call it this, but like the quick and dirty kind of just doing the desensitization. There is a flash protocol, there's a recent events protocol. I say this to say, if you were to survey 100 EMDR clinicians, they might have different opinions on this one session thing.
Yeah.
The way I see it though, man, if we have a tool that can give people some relief, as long as we are being safe and using wisdom, we ought to let people get what they need to get.
Absolutely. So you use a couple words I want to drill into there, which is what is the difference between coping and
Mm,
actually healing?
mhm. So coping can get us through some really hard moments. Coping is essential and important to survive the waves of hardship. Healing refers a little bit more to integration and longer term kind of healthy understanding of ourselves in the world. It's the nervous system actually coming out of fight or flight mode, if you will. Now, within under the guise, if you will, of coping, I'm not quite sure, I suppose, if you mean the folks who are white knuckling it, pushing everything down and just work harder, drink more Red Bull and keep going. That's not really coping. That might be managing and pushing through.
Yeah.
Or do we mean skillfully managing the things that are coming up by using healthy coping skills like meditation, exercise, humor, breathing, getting support. So, actual healing, though, is much deeper than that. It's longer lasting. It's actually metabolizing the
Yeah.
thing that happened. Um, the nervous system, once healed, stops reacting the same way to the thing that happened because it knows that it's over, because it
Yeah.
knows that that thing's not happening anymore. All parts of me now know that I'm safe. That's healing.
Yeah.
Coping is I got triggered and I'm able to stay anchored and not completely drown in it if I'm coping in a healthy way.
Yeah, I think you outlined three major things right there. Maintaining, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I am maintaining the ability to function, I will say, which is, a lot of times you'll hear those law enforcement officers say, I'm made for this job, or I've got this, I've got it under control. It doesn't affect me. That's maintaining, probably. I'm maintaining it in some way, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
is. And
Pushing
then
through. Mm-hmm.
coping, kind of is that second phase, which is I've identified that my line of work is a struggle and I see really hard things. And so I'm doing all of these things to cope, whether that's breathing or a healthier lifestyle or maybe seeing a clinician, that's coping. And then there's actually healing, right? Which is kind of what we're
Absolutely.
talking about today. And
Mm-hmm.
then, that kind of leads me into another conversation I had, which is once, the question that came to me was, if I go through EMDR, am I healed forever?
Mm.
And I won't share what my response was because I'm going to let you respond first, and then we'll see if I gave good advice or bad advice.
I am not the all determiner of good advice or bad advice, Amy, but if I go through EMDR therapy, am I healed forever? I mean, one part of me wants to say, well, as long as nothing else bad happens, but that's mostly a joke.
Right. In no line of
Even,
work, probably not possible.
you know what? If you go through EMDR therapy, though, what you are creating is more resilience. You are spending a great deal of time practicing um, rerouting your nervous system, allowing more flexibility and growth for your nervous system to know what it is to go from a shutdown mode, a fight or flight mode, and then be able to reconnect and become more adaptive. So you have a better chance for if the next big bad thing happens, to be able to have more bounce back ability, more resilience, if you will. Um, Man, healed forever just feels so infinite. I will say it should be true that that thing you came in to work on should stay pretty well processed and integrated, save for some really big re-traumatizing experience. That thing should be pretty good. And that thing can be generalized into a lot of other areas of your life, right? It might be like we worked on that call, and through the course of working on that call, I learned that it's okay to ask for help. I learned that I am more than just the efforts I can put forth to be helpful to other people. Your nervous system learns a lot during this process. So I would say you're certainly much better off for anything else that might come that is hurtful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think EMDR is probably, for my experience, the thing that I have heard to be the most healing and the most success in the law enforcement world. So from that angle, I would say yes, you are healed, but it's not a magic wand, right? It's not like it's this thing that's going to solve all of your problems. And to your point, they're going to continue to experience trauma the next day that they go back to work, right? So, but I will say, Mike's experience, he has not had any issues with the trauma that he had experienced in the past, or those images that haunted him, or the sirens that were a trigger. It's
Amazing.
been, gosh, it's been 8 years and
Huh.
none of that has come back open. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have additional things that he has seen or witnessed or has to experience that becomes traumatic. But to your point, his experience is now he's got a fresh slate. He can deal with things
Yeah.
better because
Yeah.
his nervous system is so much better off and he doesn't have all
Huh.
of this stuff buried.
Uh-huh.
So, I think I'm not a clinician, but my own personal experiences, this is the closest thing to a magic wand that I have seen or found in my own situation. But there is ongoing maintenance, and you can't just stop, going to see a clinician or therapy or doing those other things. You can't just stop doing all those because you had EMDR. And I think that was some of the questions that I was getting.
Yeah, it's a little bit about, it's important to define what success looks like for you. Um, I've had the conversation before of healing versus growth. Um, we can't undo the thing that happened. Um, if I get a wound, healing doesn't look like removing it. There might be a scar, but I can grow around that and integrate that into my life. And maybe when I look at the scar, I don't cringe quite as much. It's kind of like going to the gym. You're not gonna have that same level of fitness unless you kind of continue to do some of the work. But certainly, I do have some clients who they come in and we work on the big target they came in for. And then, maybe they come back in a couple months and they say, hey, this other thing happened. I really want to do some EMDR on it. The truth is, the process is a lot smoother and quicker than the first time because we know each other. We have an established relationship. They have established tools and resources, and we can kind of dive right in, which is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have had an individual communicate the message of, well, I don't have PTSD, so EMD is not going to work for me. Just to be clear, you don't have to have PTSD or you don't have to be labeled as PTSD for EMDR to work. Is that correct?
Absolutely. A wide range of issues, anxiety, depression, negative thoughts about yourself, all kinds of things we can work with.
Yeah, I think, anxiety, panic attacks I've heard about, that hypervigilance, the nightmares, the lack of sleeping,
Absolutely.
irritability, childhood drama. I've talked about it in some other episodes. Sometimes law enforcement officers get into it because of something that happened in their childhood. Yet if they
Absolutely.
haven't processed it, that's still in there.
Absolutely.
Grief, critical incidents. I wanted to name some so that maybe someone listening would see themselves and go, yes, that's me or that's my
Mhm.
situation. So
Mhm.
did I miss
Anger is a
any
big
major
one.
ones? Yes.
Irritability, my everyone around me says I'm snapping at everybody. I'm just irritable or I whenever I get really anxious, I get really controlling because I just got to, figure out the thing. We can work with a wide range of things. A note about PTSD as well, you won't be diagnosed and maybe it doesn't matter, but like officially with PTSD until it's been a handful of months post incident. So if incident occurs, it's great if we can get in there and do some work to prevent this becoming PTSD. Don't wait until it's been 6 months or a year later. I mean, if you do, that's fine. We can still work on it. But man, if you come a little bit sooner, we can do it while it's still fresh and you don't have to go through the months of bad sleep and nightmares and flashbacks.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about our significant others in first responding field or law enforcement field. What about spouses? Does EMDR work for spouses too?
100%. EMDR can work for absolutely anybody. EMDR can work if you were the spouse who got the text from your husband that said, go into a call, don't watch the news, be safe. And you experienced everything that comes with that. Or, you got the call and you had to race to the side of the road or race to the hospital. Or, man, even just, you know, worrying about him and having intrusive thoughts or images, or even, my gosh, your own stuff, your own
Yeah.
childhood stuff, your own anxieties, your own
Yeah.
negative self critiques. EMDR can be helpful for all of those things.
Yeah. As you were talking about that, I was even thinking about children. I know children worry about their father or mother that's in law enforcement. I don't know if EMDR is something that they would have to go through, but just that talk therapy of realizing, yeah, my dad or my mom is in this field where they could get hurt. I think those are other situations that as spouses, we should pay attention to because our kids feel it too, even if they're not saying it.
100%. Absolutely. And kids can do EMDR. There's specific trainings that clinicians can do to get a little bit more adapt to working with teens or younger kids. I've done EMDR therapy with 7-year-old, and there's folks who do it even younger. You got to be a bit creative. It doesn't look quite the same. In fact, it's kind of more fun because we do some coloring and we might do different ways to represent the thing that happened. Kids are really, man, they kind of process even easier. I think they have fewer skeptical blocks and fewer protective resistance than we do as adults. So kids are wonderful candidates for EMDR therapy.
So let's talk about the success. We talked a little bit about it earlier that for everyone, success looks a little bit different. But can you share some examples of transformation that you personally have seen?
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Um, a couple that come to mind immediately, a really big transformation was a client who had a seemingly out of nowhere a flashback of a call. He wasn't quite aware that this call had bothered him in any sort of a way. Um, but he was doing some relaxation and meditation and suddenly had a flashback of himself uh, working basically CPR on an infant. And he saw himself there. He saw the infant. He saw all of the really horrible things that happened. And upon processing the event, we came upon the realization that that day had carried a lot of really personal, painful triggers for him. And of course, a call of that magnitude um, stuck in his brain and really just became buried. He never really talked about it. He never really did any work on it because, he didn't think it bothered him. He was more focused on all of these other stressful things that had happened that day. The integration and relief that came for him, though, was the ability to who it sounds really simple to say it, but it wasn't simple to experience it, to feel his feelings. The realization that he could be tough and strong and do all of the things he has always done to help people. And still, when stuff came up in his life, he was able to feel happiness and sadness and excitement and fear. And kind of learned how to come out of a shut down robot mode, if you will. And within that robot mode, we found a whole bunch of other stored experiences. Um, Afterwards, he felt a lot healthier. He felt a lot stronger. His workouts went a lot better. He wasn't carrying as much allostatic load, as they say, which is when your body just holds on to a lot of stress. That one stands out mainly because it was a really early in my EMDR career. It's so wonderful to see that moment of,
Yeah.
wow, that really was clinging to me. But now I have fully processed it and, man, it just feels a lot better.
Hmm.
Another one that comes up was a firefighter who came in essentially at the verge of what we've kind of lightheartedly said is like, my wife made me come here. He was drinking quite a bit every night to fall asleep because he would experience all sorts of racing thoughts and anxiety at night. Um, when we got down to it, his mom and also his um, a relative's mom had both died around the same time in relatively traumatic, tragic ways. And he really had never talked about it. He was the one who held it together and planned the funerals and was the shoulder for everybody else to cry on. But he had never really processed what these losses meant for him. So when we reprocessed some of that stuff and really found permission that, you don't have to be the one to carry everything, um, he was able to appropriately feel it and release it and actually grieve. And one thing he reported was the ability to when thinking of these loved ones that passed, not just think about those last horrible, traumatic moments, but to think about them as the positive, wonderful people that they were. To of course feel the sadness, but we were able to disconnect trauma from grief, and
Yeah.
grief was able to just be grief without all of that heaviness.
Yeah.
I'll give you one more that comes to mind, just because it talks about like the human element. Would be a officer who was having a lot of flashbacks after a call at an elementary school that was potentially a bomb threat. It ended up being one of those stinging calls or the fake ones, right?
Hmm.
But of course, they didn't know that at the time. For all they
Right.
know, we have a whole bunch of young kids in danger. And the processing that took place was that of a father processing the fears for his own children,
Mhm.
which naturally cannot, will not, and does not happen when you are the officer in charge of that scene.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like then, right, you go home, you tuck your own kids into bed, and then you get up for work the next day and you just keep pushing on
Yeah.
until boom, this is coming back. And why can't I sleep? And why am I so agitated all of the time?
Yeah.
What he had not yet said out loud was, I saw my own kids in the faces of those first graders.
Yeah.
And that needed to come out and that needed to be felt. And of course, it's like an intense, uncomfortable feeling, but it's also a relief. It's as though a weight is lifted when you say that's what that is. And
Yeah.
we reprocess it to make it less vivid and to find better meaning and adaptation around it. And that one was a lot of relief as well.
Yeah. So much healing available. Sometimes we joke about law enforcement officers being cynical. They
Hmm.
get 5 years under their belt, or, it doesn't even take 5 years, let's say 2 years, but certainly if they have 30 years under their belt, they're kind of cynical and hard and
Sure.
sometimes emotionless. And it's kind of become a stigma of its own of that's just acceptable, right? I've had a life of a cop or of a first responder, and I've seen a lot of things, and I'm entitled to be shut down. I
Hmm.
hope anybody listening to this episode today, whether you are that person itself or you are the spouse or a family member of that person, I hope if anything came out of this episode for you, it's that that doesn't have to be the case. There is healing. There is things out there that are available to you. Don't allow that to be your life or your family's life. There's just so much healing that can happen that your quality of life can be so much better. And the three examples that you gave, I mean, if they had never went through EMDR, they would not have processed that, and they probably would be on a completely different path of life right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the lesson, right, is some form of, you don't have to carry all of it alone. Compartmentalization is important and a great skill and necessary on the job, but you are one person with one brain and one body, and that didn't just affect police you or firefighter you or dispatcher you or doctor you. It also impacted human you, mother you, father you, friend you, child you, and that part of you may be the one that just needs to release what happened. So you
Yeah.
don't have to live with it anymore, so that you
Yeah.
don't have to be in survival mode
Right.
anymore. You are worth the work. You are worth the healing, and you deserve it. And man, I think what keeps a lot of people from seeking help is some idea, right, of like, man, I'm weak, or this is weird, or I might be judged. But
Yes.
the truth is, you're really just a part of um, this really crowded island of humans, and we all think we're alone, but it's a really, really crowded island. We're all struggling. We're all dealing with our own stuff. Yours
Yeah.
just might look different,
Yeah.
but honestly, probably not. If you talk to the folks around you,
That's
we're
right.
all dealing with it,
Yeah.
and you deserve to be free. You deserve to set it down. Stop carrying it all by yourself.
Absolutely. Very well said. So, one final question here, Alana. If a law enforcement officer or a spouse or a first responder of any remembers just one thing from this episode today, what do you want them to remember?
Hmm.
I know just
I
picking one is hard.
Just one. Yeah, it could be a lot of different things, right? But I think it's also important to note that you don't have to wait for a crisis to get help is an important thing maybe we haven't named yet. You don't have to wait until you're diagnosed with PTSD, or your family is falling apart, or you're yelling at your spouse or your children to get help. And if you're at that point, that's fine, get help. But also, we can recognize that therapy doesn't have to be scary. EMDR therapy is not as mystical and intense and scary as maybe the movies make it seem. But man,
Yeah,
it's a relief. And we have something that works. We have therapies and interventions that will help you. So hey, why not give it a try? And you deserve the help. You deserve the freedom.
absolutely. Absolutely. What I'm reminded of is on another episode, a gentleman, Steve Click, had said there was at one time a stigma around wearing bulletproof vests. And, they didn't always wear them. This was 30 years ago, and it was
Mm-hmm.
viewed as weakness if they wore the vest. Fast forward, I don't think you're going to go many places and not see an officer in a bulletproof vest, right? So, my mind goes to if we can take the mental health of our loved ones and fast forward 30 years here where everyone is acceptable of counseling of things like EMDR. If everyone just did it because that is what made us healthy and that's what gave us a better life, think about how different our world would be right now.
Hmm.
And so that's my challenge, everyone listening today. Let's be the change. Let's be the generation that says, mental health for our loved ones is so important. And, together, if we make counseling, talk therapy, EMDR just natural and part of their job, I think everyone's quality of life is going to be so much better. So that's my challenge to everyone.
I love that. That's awesome. So important.
Yes.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Alana. I'm sure there's lots more questions. So who knows? Maybe we'll do a third episode here. I love this topic.
Absolutely.
And I love the healing that it can bring to our community. So I will do 100 on EMDR if it helps our officers. But I do want to thank you. You always come with so much information and so much knowledge. Thank you for sharing those success stories today. I think those will definitely hit home to, maybe someone that's on the ledge. So thank you so much. Any final thoughts?
No, I appreciate you having me on here. I appreciate all of the advocacy that you do. As you were talking, the one last thing that hit me was like, listen, if you can't do it for yourself, maybe you can't even do it for your spouse, do it for your kids. That's one thing
Yeah.
that I'm so proud of my husband for, is he is showing our son that it's okay for men to heal and feel and be real. And I didn't mean for that to become a poem. And he's still a really strong man while he's doing it. It doesn't make you a pansy or a flower or anything like that.
Yeah.
In fact, he's a bit more attractive this way. I'll tell you what.
Yeah,
So, take a chance and do it for what matters.
absolutely. Thank you so much. I'd like to close today by saying this. I truly hope something in this conversation spoke to you. Maybe it gave you clarity, maybe it gave you hope, or maybe it just simply helped you realize that healing is possible. If you or someone you love has been struggling, I hope this episode encourages you to take the next step towards healing through EMDR or another trusted resource. I've included a resource in this episode description to help you find an EMDR specialist or connect directly with Alana if you'd like to learn more. And before we end today, I'd like to close with the prayer. Our Heavenly Father, please be with each and every person listening today. Give them the strength to ask for help, give them the guidance to find the right resource, and give them the courage to move closer towards healing. Be with our first responders, their spouses, and their families as they carry burdens that so often go unseen. Remind them they are not alone. Remind them healing is possible, and remind them there is hope even in the hardest moments. In Jesus' name, amen.